Welcome to my life, my business. Wish I was here. And you know what? The answer to wish I was here is I am here, which means I'm present in my life. I'm enjoying this journey called life, whether it's in pursuit of a career, goals, whether it's living a balanced, healthy lifestyle, whatever that might be, you are present, fully present. And the kinds of topics that we share is to help you be fully present and truly enjoy your life. So, without further, welcome, Claudine. Shanaz, it's your turn. You're going to take us through our conversation today. And
Yes.
as usual, it's like a roulette. Don't often know what's going to come. All I can tell you, it's exciting.
Oh, forward.
Over to you.
You are putting a lot of pressure on me. But no. So last week you spoke about boundaries, and I think that you hinted that I need to continue with it. And it came at a timely, very timely, the conversation and the discussion. And I'm going to talk about that. But I am specifically going to talk about women and boundaries and the issues around women and boundaries. And I think that if you wanted to know more about the boundaries, for those who are listening, that you, whether it's recorded or here, that you listen to last week's discussion that Jacques had on just kind of introducing boundaries and setting it. So I'm going to focus on women. So I just want to just let you know about the status of women's health actually. And apparently, so one of my favorite authors, and he does these master classes on trauma, etc., is called he is Gabriel Mateo. And he is a psychiatrist, and but he's also a doctor, like a not a GP. Does research in any case, but he's also a GP. And apparently, autoimmune diseases such as your multiple sclerosis, scleroderma, psoriasis, type 1 diabetes, and there are a few others, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, etc., Crohn's disease, chronic fatigue, IBS, etc. He says that his research, which he's done over a number of years, that autoimmune diseases have a gender, and that 80% of autoimmune diseases or people who get autoimmune diseases are actually women. And I found that very interesting. He also found it interesting, and this is what he says: why are women at risk of developing um autoimmune diseases? And he says that what his research and what he's discovered in his practice is that, and I agree with all of these here in my experience as well. He says that women compulsively care for others. So when I mean compulsively care for others, meaning that regardless of doing good for themselves, they care for others. Um, they cannot help themselves but care for others. And I think that that is often, I think, used against women as a weapon. Um, in the feminist world, they will say that caretaking is weaponized against women. So, in other words, we compulsively care. He also says that women tend to suppress healthy anger as we are peacemakers, right? In fact, what happens when women experience anger, they internalize it and they feel guilty about it. He says that women also think that they are responsible for how others feel. And he says women also work in the world without taking care of their true selves while they are investing in others. So we do not reflect on ourselves and think about who we are authentically, what our roles are, what we want in life, etc. But we are so busy taking care of others, ensuring that others' needs are met, that they know where they are going, that we are investing in their future, developing them, but we do not think about developing ourselves. He also says that women are worried about disappointing others, and that they believe that they should not disappoint others. And so this has actual very interesting ramifications for women and boundaries, which is our our conversation. And the interesting thing about this is it actually then greatly affects our health and our well-being in the world. And so what I in preparation for today, I was reading, because I mentioned last week a lot of the women that come to my practice and that I engage with, even students in class, a lot of them don't know about, they struggle with boundaries, they struggle with setting boundaries. I myself struggle with setting boundaries in certain contexts. And so, just for those, a reminder of what boundaries are guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for others to behave towards them, and how they will respond when someone passes those limits. And so, boundaries, in a sense, can be about learning to say no. So, the other thing I wanted to say about boundaries is that boundaries is a skill set. It is not a characteristic. We are not automatically, I mean, I don't know, some people more than others, but it's not automatic. And I think for women particularly, this is a skill set that we need to learn. And for example, what I want to say is, in preparation, I was reading this CEO of, she wrote on it in a blog, and of an international women's organization. And firstly, I want to say that no one is a mind reader, right? So I think women struggle to ask for what they want and what they need, because they feel guilty and they feel worried about how the other person is going to respond. And so we struggle to share how we really feel, and we struggle to share and articulate what we want, because we are worried, and that we are being selfish, or we worried about how the other person is going to respond. And so learning about boundaries is then really important for women. The other thing so she did a survey, and what she found, she did a survey with 120 women, was that women are more likely to experience stress and anxiety in setting boundaries, and that women are less likely than men to set boundaries. And I can agree with all of this. I literally see it, have experiences and stories to share about women in leadership position, even myself, where I failed to set down clear boundaries and expectations, and then I became angry and resentful about it afterward. And so the other thing which is really interesting is that what she says is that women are also under more stress to be accommodating and polite. So the whole boundary setting issue is not so easy for women as it is for men, because of this pressure on society, historical reasons, obviously patriarchy, how they think what women's roles are, how women should be quiet and well behaved, etc. And that makes women more prone to be accommodating and polite instead of asking for what they need. And men, they actually found that men don't necessarily think that they are responsible for how others respond to them. And so the clear differences in how we engage in the world as women and how we set boundaries. The other thing is that we need to think of it as women, that when our boundaries are weak or non-existent, we can actually feel overwhelmed, anxious, and insecure. I would add angry and resentful. That's just me, because I get annoyed then when people that I'm expecting something from, or where my boundaries have been blurred, I haven't communicated what I need and what I want. Then I get angry and resentful, and so I would add it to that list as well. Annoyed also. So boundary setting then is a skill. So how can we kind of go about this? How do we do this as women? So the first thing that I want to, and there's a list of 10 things. I'm going to see if we can go through it quickly so we can have a conversation about this. So the first thing, which I think is vitally important, when I engage with women in a range of different contexts, I see and pick up that they are not aware of where there are no boundaries in their life and where there are blurred boundaries. So, the first thing that you actually need to do in setting up better boundaries is recognize which area of your life you need boundaries in. Which area of your life did you perhaps not think about, that you didn't actually set out your expectations? You don't have any boundaries, and so it means that you need to build up these boundaries, men, in then. And so it's about being honest with yourself and thinking about your physical, emotional, and mental capacity, and also importantly, thinking about your needs, your wants, and what's most important to you. um, and that is what I find, exactly what Gabriel Matthias says, that as women in the world, we are investing constantly in developing the selves, the personhood of others, but we are not thinking about what is it that's important to me, what is it that I need, and what do I want in the situation. And she says, unfortunately, sometimes this can actually also, we may find that we are led by our emotions, we are reactionary. And she says that, so instead of seeing this as a negative thing, see that if I'm responding emotionally, if I'm reacting to a situation, like in my case, angry and resentful or annoyed, then actually that means that a boundary needs to be set, or a boundary that I didn't know I have, I need to set it. And so what happens is that some of us, particularly women, have no boundaries, or we struggle to see and identify where our boundaries are blurred, and there are consequences to that. Another one is communicate these boundaries. Once you've identified the boundaries, the next step is to communicate it with the people in your life who will be affected by those boundaries. And that can be, you know what, I that could be colleagues, that could be family members, that you say, you know what, I am not available at that time. I'm available this time, or don't call me after hours. Or so it's about communicating with the ones that are affected by it. I often experience in my practice when I'm engaging with women that we struggle to communicate those boundaries even when we have them. The other thing, the next thing, which we've spoken a lot about here, is learning to say no. What I suggest when I go in and do these conversations with women, or I get invited out to speak to a group of women, I often let them do a role play. And I did this literally last week, where I told the group of women, and I have this picture of beautiful pink, bright pink shoes. And I tell them, imagine your best friend or your sister, your favorite sister, wants to borrow those pink shoes for a wedding they're going to. Practice saying no to each other. And what I encourage is that it's because women experience stress and anxiety when setting boundaries, we need to role play this in our heads. The other thing about learning to say no is to acknowledge that sometimes there are a number of us who are people pleasers. And when we are people pleasers, it's very hard for us to say no. So that's why it becomes a boundary setting is not a skill we learn overnight. It's a journey that one is on. The other thing is that what they suggest is to set boundaries in advance. So this means if I want to set a boundary in advance, then what I want to do is think about my expectations, and I want to tell people in advance about my expectations, and tell them, and also tell them about your boundaries. Now, I'm going to give you an example. So, I went away and I left my place to a lovely young lady, and I never told her clearly because I thought she would know. Like, and I said, people aren't mind readers. I thought she would know not to go in some cupboards of mine. And this young lady, bless her, I'm not angry with her, I was annoyed with her. This young lady, when she cleaned up, she decided she's going to clean up my cupboards as well because she wanted to make it nice and sparkly for me when I arrive. I was not impressed that she went through some of my personal things, but she's a lovely young person. And if I ask her to look after my place again, I will communicate. And I realized I did not communicate with her because in my family, we don't go in each other's cupboards. It's I will visit my sister and I will not go into her bedroom. Now, we have discovered as a family, because we are very boundaried, that others don't think so. If they are your sibling adults, they feel free to go into your fridge and your cupboard. My family, unfortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, we're not like that. I also know situations where families go to the family. I don't do this. It's a big boundary for me, and I will communicate it clearly. They go to the bathroom and they leave the door open. We don't do that in my family, right? And or they bath with the door open. Even if it's young children, we close the door. Too much information. Too much information. So I need to let people know my boundaries ahead of time. And the fifth one is avoid overcommitting. This is where the people pleaser. So if you want to learn to set boundaries, stop overcommitting yourself. Be realistic about your time and energy. So I think sometimes because women are compulsive carers, we tend to commit to rescuing and helping people without being realistic about time and energy. So it's a knee jerk reaction to step in and support someone. That can be really valuable, but in the long run, you can burn out. So, what they suggest is take a pause, right? Take a pause, meaning tell the person that you'll get back to them in 24 or 8 hours, regardless of what the situation is, instead of quickly responding because you responding out of your need to people please, because you care so much about the situation and the other person. The sixth thing is surround yourself with supportive people. Spend time with people who respect your boundaries, but then again you need to be aware of what your boundaries are, because it's pointless trying to learn to set boundaries when you're not aware of what the type of boundaries are that you need in your life. And what you'll find is people will invade those boundaries without realizing it. And so it's really important to kind of think about ensure, if you're aware of what boundaries are and where you need it in your life, you will immediately know then that this is the group of people I want to spend time with. The other thing is to create physical boundaries. This can mean close your office, your room door, switch off your phone, physically separate yourself from people and situations. Whether you have an open plan office, there's still ways in which you can kind of switch off. Like I said, switching off the phone, put the earphones on, or earpods, etc. You can create physical boundaries, and sometimes for some of us we literally need physical boundaries, which really help us. Another one is to set consequences. So this is really important, that and it goes along with boundaries. It's really pointless one have bound you it's pointless you have boundaries and you do not set consequences and follow through with those consequences when someone has violated those boundaries. So, for example, when you've asked someone to not text you during a certain time and they insist on doing it, so don't respond to the text. Or in worst case scenarios, if it's really someone that doesn't need to be on that phone list of yours, then you can block them. That's the extreme. So because you want to, and you would have communicated this ahead of time. So I sometimes do this with my postgraduate students. Some of them or I tell them, I'm going to give you my number because I need to sometimes be with some of them in communication directly. And I tell them, but if you're going to text me when out, just for little things that are not important or for whatever, over weekends, certain times, then I'm going to block you. And I do that with some of them. There's thankfully, because I communicate ahead of time, they actually quite good in managing those things. So the important thing is around setting consequences. The other thing is to seek support. It's challenging setting boundaries. It is anxiety producing, and for women, sometimes we feel guilty. So seek support then when, which, whether that's through counseling, formal support, or informal support. Talk about it with someone. And then the final thing is practice self reflection. And what I'm referring to here is spend time getting to know who the authentic you is, what it is that you need. Be open to feedback from others and make the adjustments necessary. Speak to the person that you're struggling with the boundaries with, and or you're struggling to ask what you really need, and ask them about, how do you think, what can I do to build better boundaries? I'm struggling with this, please help me. And I think that those are kind of really important things, because as I said, the consequences for women, it is really much more challenging for women to set boundaries. It's not only my experience, but they've actually proven this in research as well. So yeah, so I just, that's my bit, because I wanted to chat and hear your opinion, Jacques, and what you think, because I know that you coach women, and so I'd be really interested in hearing your view.
Mm. So there's quite a few things that you touched on. It's great, and it kind of builds on what I introduced last time. But it is interesting to me that the natural wiring of women, especially when there's threat, is to care. Very sort of basic response is to care. So it's so natural, and yeah. And my thought was, well, how does one then unlearn it, or rather not unlearn it, but how to master it to some extent? I mean, what would it take not to naturally want to care, to nurture, because that sits within the nature of a woman, just from my perspective. And I know that if it's far more challenging, that guilt feeling. And I tell you, just anecdotally, is it often surprises me in relationships between a man and a woman, where if the man has done something really destructive and overstepped boundaries with a woman, she lets him know that he has. And out of, and I mean, it's true though that hell does have no fury than a woman scorned. And he would know that he's fully chastised until something happens to him, and he needs to be rescued, and she forgets all about that boundaries, and she forgives so easily. And I suppose the finer point would be, how do you sustain boundary setting? So I'm now talking about, yes, you stood up for yourself, you've asserted your boundaries, you felt uncomfortable, you're more aware, and I mean, how you ended off with point number 10 is practicing self-reflection. And you know what popped into my mind was, meet your authentic self, and you have your own desires, you have your own goals, you know what success looks like for you. And rather than doing it as a zero sum game, is pursue success in a win-win context. As long as you are successful, help somebody else to be successful, as a mindset, you know, that you don't do it at your expense. And thinking about it that way, I would say, is something that I come across a lot. So in my own coaching practice, this is where we kind of end up, that it's okay to also want. It's okay to also have needs, but express those needs. It's okay. It's okay to deserve success. I end up saying a lot of these things, especially to my women clients.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so for me, part of that is also for the women, that it's okay to care also. Because otherwise we feel guilty for who we are. And what I say then to manage that is that, think of it as limits. That, if I do not take care of myself and understand who I truly am and what I need, then I cannot give and care to the best of my capacity. And those who I want to give to and share and care about will, actually not know the real me. They will not be able to get the benefits. And so if that's part of who I am, then there's a good way to manage that also, and that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing.
Hmm. Yes, which speaks to, I think it's point number 5, Shanaz, where you say, stop overcommitting yourself. Which then when you say take a pause, think about it, which means instinctively you want to, instinctively you're reacting, it's knee jerk. But when you're taking a pause, you actually just help yourself respond with discernment, right? You can only help
Yep.
so many people that well. More than that exceeds your capacity. And then you do it at the expense of your health and your well being
Yeah.
and your stressing and so forth.
Yeah.
And it's and I
And
guess
then that indicates a lack of self-awareness about your own limitations and, your own abilities, because that then, and eventually the long term of that is you compromise your health and your productivity in the long run.
Yes, absolutely. And but the point would be, or I shouldn't say but, it's and the point would be is, it's okay to be you, but be an effective you. Spend your time, your energy, your emotions, your feelings, your nurturing objectives. Spend that wisely.
And I would say strategically,
Yes.
you know in and I think it links back to getting to know you, because if I get to know me, to who am I authentically, then I know the things that I'm going to spend my time on, and that I need to spend my energy on. I will be able to identify how much time and energy I can spend on those things, and it won't be an issue for me to put in a boundary when I say to a colleague, I'm sorry, I'm not available on a Saturday, or I'm not available on a Sunday because I have these commitments on Sundays, for example.
Mm. Absolutely. You mentioned that men seem to be able to move away and have no issue around others perceive their boundary setting approach. And I guess, these two words are my or form part of my tool of choice, in order just to start asserting oneself in this area. Two words. So what? So what if somebody's upset because you are looking after yourself, you're spending time with yourself, Me time. Me time, let me tell you, is strategic. I hear a lot of me time. Men don't normally work through a program where me time becomes so important, but a lot more of my women clients set me time and specifically schedule it in such a way that they don't feel guilty spending me time. In order to spend me time and experience the benefits of me time, you set the boundaries.
Absolutely. And so, one of my favorite quotes, and I'll end off and say goodbye with this, is my favorite quotes by Audre Lorde, who's a feminist. She says, and I may have mentioned it here before, she says, caring for myself is not self indulgent, it is self preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. So, for me, for women, caring for ourselves and our authentic self is really, it's this constant thing that we are needing to fight against because of the boxes that society has placed us in, on in all different spheres.
On that note, thank you, Shanaz. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And lots to think about. And to the ladies listening out there, be challenged. Take your stand. It's okay. Be you, all of you, while proceeding or progressing in life, reaching your goals, living your life in a way that brings no harm, does no harm, but ensures that there is no harm done to yourself as well. So, Shanaz, thank you. And
Thank you. Bye.
mm, until next week, bye.